Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the president and CEO of SCORE, David Mansouri.
Good morning. So good to see all of you this morning. Welcome to SCORE's Future Forward Summit. It's really with a lot of gratitude and excitement that we get to host all of you today. Leaders, advocates, educators, business leaders, who are all focused on investing in making Tennessee an excellent place to learn, to develop talent, and to fuel a flourishing economy in our state. At SCORE, we're really amazed at what can happen when leaders like you from lots of different sectors come together with a common interest. And that interest, I think, today is expanding opportunity to develop the talents of all students, no matter their backgrounds or their future goals, as they travel through their education to employment journey and land in a career that enables a life of economic independence. When we act on behalf of students, we act on behalf of all Tennesseans. And I truly believe that we have the right people in the room today to propel students and our state forward by creating pathways that are stronger, more effective, and more accessible so that students seamlessly move from education into a prosperous career. We have lots of champions for Tennessee students in this room with us today. We have policymakers, we have folks who are leading K-12 work, folks who are leading work in the higher education space, we have elected officials, we have local leaders, we have philanthropy, we have so many critical partners who are here with us today. And I also just want to say a big thank you to our host committee for this event, which you can find listed at the back of the guidebook that's at your table. This committee has met for almost a year to give us good guidance and feedback on this event and to elevate the exemplars and models both in Tennessee and across the country that could serve as inspiration for our event. So just want to say thank you to the host committee for your work. We all know that on this journey from education to work, every student deserves more than a pathway that is based on luck. We want to intentionally develop talent in a way that prepares students for the growing quality jobs that Tennessee has to offer and for fulfilled lives. Students deserve a plan, course options and experiences, strategic support, and ways to have confidence that the effort they are putting in today will unlock future opportunity for a lifetime. In fact, I'd argue that the most important thing we can do for our state's economy as a whole is to prepare our state's talented students with the education and skills needed for the workforce of today and tomorrow. And I think I'm stealing this phrase from President Boyd, but education is economic development. That means we have to be working and acting beyond the traditional parameters of just K-12 education or just higher education and into new spaces that link up with or are squarely in the workforce development arena. While we remain committed to K-12 and post-secondary pursuits, workforce for many of us is the next frontier that demands our attention, investing in the state's economic growth through the honed talents of every student in our state. And we already know that the result when education and business comes together to collaborate on solutions for students is a really powerful one. National and Tennessee-specific data clearly show that on average, when students pursue any education beyond a high school diploma, from a workforce-aligned technical credential to a bachelor's degree and beyond, that trajectories change. The results are higher wages, increased economic opportunities, and the skills to weather future economic recessions and changes. Post-secondary training matters, and that includes all kinds of post-secondary experiences, from non-degree credential programs to four-year degrees, and we'll talk about what that looks like throughout the day today. We also know that more skilled labor, a more skilled labor force, supports greater economic development in communities. And importantly, we know that Tennessee is a place and has been a place committed to education and workforce opportunity. We have been for a long time, and I'll just note just a few nights ago, in the State of the State address, Governor Lee announced continued investments and initiatives to better connect education to workforce need. So as we go throughout the day today, let's keep the idea of a student-centered and career-connected learning journey front and center in the conversations that we will have. And as I mentioned, I think what's unique about this day and the folks who are in this room is the opportunity for collaboration and cross-sector connectedness. How often do you see education and workforce leaders in numbers like this coming together to learn from the same exemplars and experts? We could each work in our silos, or we can answer the call to come together and build strong pathways for our students across the different areas of work that we lead. Each of us plays a role in this work. We have educators who think about foundational classroom elements, business leaders who need prepared students for the workforce, policymakers who are enacting policies and strategies that bridge education and work, and advocates who are working alongside each of us to see the challenges and help propose new ideas and change. And I'll just note that this spirit of collaboration, of bringing stakeholders together, is really a spirit that's foundational to SCORE. It was the sort of guiding mission for Senator Bill Frist when he founded the organization 15 years ago this year. So I'm excited to spend the day learning with each of you, from those who are shaping bold visions for how Tennessee and the nation can evolve, and to also learn from those of you who are doing the hard work of turning big ideas into action in our state. And to make the most of the day and really to sort of ground our conversations, we have to start with a quick look at where we have been as a state in advancing student success. And there are some milestones, some very recent milestones that we're going to just sort of ground our day in and ground our story in. We'll look at K-12. We'll then look at post-secondary to workforce transition. We'll start by looking at some K-12 data. So you all know 20 years ago, Tennessee had a wake-up call in the performance of our K-12 education system. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce gave Tennessee the letter grade that nobody wants, an F. And in this case, it was because we were not being truthful about how well students were progressing and prepared for college and career. Academic proficiency and lower scores for historically underserved students were also named as challenges. And we responded as a state with some big policy changes that helped Tennessee move in an upward direction. And while we know there's a lot more work to do to reach the ultimate goals that we aspire for students, we're seeing very promising progress. We have closed as a state that honesty gap with our state test scores showing notable and sustained growth, and now showing the same trends as national scores. Which brings me to some data that just came out. And I think it's important to spend a little bit of time on this data and celebrate. And that's the release of the National Assessment for Educational Progress, or the nation's report card, which is a biannual measure of the nation's 4th grade and 8th grade achievement in math and reading, broken down by state. Tennessee stood out this year as a bright spot because I believe we put our resources and policies to work, and we took action on things that mattered for students. As you can see here, Tennessee's commitment to its students led to progress over the last 15 years, landing us in a spot where we scored above the national average in all areas for the first time. We're now in the top 25 states for overall achievement and in the top 10 states for growth since 2022. Just note, we're also #1 in the nation for the achievement of Black students in 8th grade math. So while we celebrate these gains, there are also clear areas of needed focus and a recognition that even with improvement, overall proficiency, even with those gains, overall proficiency still does not meet the goals that we have for students. These are the areas that we have to continue to focus on as a state to make sure that all students are prepared in their K-12 educational experience for what comes later. There's a lot more data that we could dig into here, but I think it's certainly clear as a state that we've been focusing on policies and priorities that are driving results for students at the K-12 level, and we know that's paying off for students. So with a continued commitment to core priorities in K-12, we also find ourselves in the next phase of that work, which is creating greater alignment along the education to work pathway so that students have access to more information and more opportunities that will lead to a life of economic independence. And again, I think to tell this story, we have to look back at the progress that we've made as a state and then to our current state looking forward, which points, I think, again, to the work that we're here to do today. So a simple look back again in this space shows us that our state has already acted in really big and important ways. Through the Complete College Tennessee Act of 2010, state leaders centered around a higher education system focused on completion with a new outcomes-based funding formula built on student success. In 2013, we set a post-secondary attainment goal for 55% of Tennesseans to have a degree or credential by this year. And to build on that goal, the Tennessee Promise Scholarship Act of 2014 changed the college-going conversation in our state when we became the first state in the nation to offer our high school graduates 2 years of community or technical college tuition-free. And since then, we've built on that effort to boost college access, affordability, and completion. And then more recently, 2019, we established as a state the Tennessee Office of Apprenticeship with a focus on increasing the number of registered apprenticeships across the state that are mixing classroom learning with on-the-job training. And in 2023, just a few years ago, we invested over $1 billion in strengthening Tennessee's colleges of applied technology, which are important engines in our state for learning and workforce development. And again, in the higher education space, this work is leading to progress, and progress specifically on our attainment rate, the measure that shows how many adults in Tennessee have a post-secondary certificate or degree. The Lumina Foundation's recent report, Stronger Nation, confirmed this, showing we have increased attainment in our state to 49%. And our strong foundation has helped us get there, and there's still much more room to grow. Unfortunately, however, Tennessee still lags when compared to the national average. And we know, and we'll talk more about this throughout the day today, we know that 63% of jobs in our state will need post-secondary education by 2031. And the transition from education to work is clearly not seamless for more than half of Tennesseans. We also know that about 49% of graduates receive a credential that is not necessarily aligned to a high demand occupation in our state. And there's a wide range of wage discrepancies when it comes to certain credentials. Students are not necessarily getting the economic opportunity from their credential so that it can lead to an economically independent life. This also leads to the realization that the number of Tennesseans participating in the workforce has been declining, despite some rebounds nationally. And there are huge gaps to close. And I think that's the reason why you're here today. If these numbers all looked great, there would be perhaps no need to come together and think about how do we do better. So the question I think to ask is, what innovative new solutions can we identify together that are worthy of our collective pursuits so that more students find their way from an excellent Tennessee education to a fruitful career in our state? How can we make sure that more students are prepared for their futures and that Tennessee has the best prepared and most dynamic workforce in the nation? So at SCORE, we've been pursuing this question over the last year in a few different ways. And first, we worked alongside many of you in this room to develop what we call a credential impact framework, which really grounds the conversation in a belief that education beyond high school leads to a life of opportunity, but that too many students are not finding that path with enough ease. So we spent time working with many of you in this room to build a framework to help Tennesseans to clearly understand and assess the impact of specific credentials and degrees that they might obtain. This is not prescriptive, but it is structured. It offers a lens to think about wages, job outlook, and stackability for anyone analyzing the potential impact of a credential. We've also spent time in the last several years identifying some key policy opportunities that will ensure more students are prepared for a future career enabling economic independence. And that includes things like leveraging and expanding our work-based learning experiences, revising the state's outcomes-based funding formula in higher education, collecting data on and incentivizing more non-degree credential opportunities, and engaging employers, helping industry leaders understand how an employee's education experience can lead to a stronger workforce and workforce outcomes. And finally, want to really just invite you into the work around a new set of goals that we've worked on at SCORE. We call this Tennessee 2030, which is a shared data-driven vision for Tennessee student success, oriented around goals that match key milestones along a student's journey that will lead them from an excellent K-12 experience to a fulfilling career. And using the 2030 metrics that are here, we can imagine the transformative change that can take place when we aim to move one additional student per classroom each year toward a goal, all while keeping our sights on advancing success for all Tennessee students. And so specifically, we want to see change in these key milestones that we know matter on the journey towards success. As an example, third grade English language arts. Currently, 41% of third graders are proficient in ELA. We add one student every year in every classroom, we get to 71% by 2030. Seventh grade math. Currently, 38% of seventh grade students are proficient in math. One student in every classroom proficient each year. That gets us to 58% by 2030. Post-secondary pursuits. 57% of high school students pursue a post-secondary opportunity aligned to their long-term goals. Our goal is 77%. And post-secondary achievement. Currently, 44% of students in Tennessee complete a degree or credential. We'd like to see that get to 64% of post-secondary students, with 75% of those being impact credentials. And so just take a second to think about this very practical approach. One additional student per classroom across the state for the next 5 years, and we raise student achievement in pretty significant ways. And even though that progress could be immense, we can't stop the work until we ask if those 4 goals actually tell the full story of success. We have to follow all the way through to career in order to close the attainment gap and close the gap between the credentials students are earning and what the workforce needs. So we know there's some other factors here. Students are disconnected. Nearly 1 in 6 young people between the ages of 16 and 24 are disconnected from both education and the workforce. Nearly 64,000 high school graduates in the class of 2021 fulfilled the requirements of the Tennessee Promise program, yet 50% never enrolled in any post-secondary opportunity. This leaves a question mark around whether they re-engage in education, enlisted in the military, or pursued additional workforce training. And even those with a post-secondary credential may still be unprepared for a changing workforce. Nearly half of Tennesseans are underemployed based on their education needs. Tennessee has, as I mentioned before, one of the lower workforce participation rates of any state. So these roadblocks beg a question: what do we not know about why students end or delay their journey? And why are they not able to get connected to the right opportunities? We want to explore that in our conversations today. Finally, we want to invite you to join us in this work. We want to ask folks to link arms with us around these 2030 goals by making a commitment to act on behalf of them and use this data to inform the work that you're doing that we know can spur innovation, but also to continue to ask, what else do we not know about what is happening for students as they progress from education into career? And you can scan the QR code on the screen, or it's also in page 2 of your guidebook, to join us in this effort of focusing on these key goals as a state. We also know that this 2030 data is a kind of a living and breathing data set, and you can certainly look forward to much more data, including this data broken out by local community across the state in the months to come. When we work together on priorities like this, we know we can create more stories like the one we heard recently when we visited students at TCAT Murfreesboro. We met 2 students who were both pursuing a credential in industrial electrical maintenance mechatronics. These students said they found this credential opportunity after realizing that a childhood hobby of breaking things and fixing them, as well as a desire to be the quote, fix-it guy for a future family, could actually become a job. And it could become the kind of job that, in their words, quote, will always be there. And for us, I think that's called a high demand job, and help those students earn a thriving wage. Their friends encouraged them to enroll. They got the right guidance from teachers and counselors at TCAT, and those students are optimistic about their future. This is what all of this hard work we're doing today is about, setting students up for a brighter future. And we're eager to dig into this specific challenge, and so eager to dig into this specific challenge that we're also today announcing a new initiative at SCORE, the Future Forward Innovation Grant. And we know that this education to workspace, for all the things that I just mentioned, is a place where more focus is needed to accelerate student pathways from education to career. And so we're seeking across our state education, community, and industry leaders, as well as entrepreneurs, to design, launch, or scale solutions that are supporting stronger education pathways across our state. Recipients of this innovation grant will receive up to $75,000 strategic support from SCORE and participation in a cohort-style learning experience. So we'd invite you to learn more if you're interested. You see the QR code on the screen, and additional information will go live by March 4th. All right, so here's our day today. This morning, we're going to look at opportunities for career-connected education and programs across K-12 education, higher education, and workforce development. We're going to start with the landscape from Tennessee and national perspectives with just an incredible panel of leaders who will start our day off. We'll then move into some breakout sessions to explore exemplars in this space. We're then going to talk data. I think you're going to hear data throughout the day today as a key theme and priority, specifically data's use in driving us to create and apply a framework for assessing and advancing credentials that lead to high-wage, high-demand jobs. Then we are going to eat, and then we're going to have some fantastic Spark sessions to kick off our afternoon focused on collaboration and alignment across different stakeholder groups. We will have a series of breakout sessions that will highlight really incredible exemplars of collaboration, both in Tennessee and across the country. And then we're going to end with a conversation about the future and about innovation. And we will have a keynote presentation and then a panel to talk about how Tennessee can implement new ideas into our current landscape. You have, and you've seen on your table, a guidebook and an agenda. We want to ask you to use these tools to take notes on reflections, ideas, action steps that you have throughout the day. Every section in your guidebook has information about the speakers, offers a few questions to prompt your thinking, and also leaves lots of room for notes throughout the day today. And every resource that's mentioned today throughout the day is also included on our website. You can get there using the QR code that's throughout the book titled Resources. So that goes a lot deeper on some of the content that we will talk about. And then want to mention two final things. One, there's a postcard on your table, and want to ask that before you leave, jot down the things you want to remember, something you want to do next, and give us your address. We'll mail that back to you. So you're reminded about a week from now that that's something you wanted to do. And then there's going to be a survey about how the day helps you in this education to work alignment. And just ask, even if you can't stay the whole day today, to please take that survey. We'd love your feedback. The QR code for that is on page 30 of your book. It really informs the work that we do at SCORE and would really value your input. So we are going to turn to our first panel discussion. And I just would say again, a reminder, our students need more than ever economic independence. Our state needs economic development. Education is the solution for both. And today in this room is a place where we will take together next steps on behalf of students and all Tennesseans intent on finding success in education and the workforce. The motivations that we have, I think, in this room will carry us to driving and ensuring that there is student success And it takes collaboration. It takes all of you in this room to realize that. We feel like there is immense opportunity and excited and really honored to be in this conversation with each of you today. So we're going to turn next to our first panel discussion.
Joining David on stage, please welcome Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Education, Lizette Gonzalez Reynolds, Chief Economist at the Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce, Dr. Nicole Smith, President and CEO of Arnold Ventures, Kelly Rhee, co-founder and journalist at WorkShift, Paul Fain, and the President of the University of Tennessee, Randy Boyd.
So micing people up.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Fantastic. It is really an honor to be with this group of leaders this morning. Excited about this conversation. And I mentioned a little bit about data and wanting to start this conversation grounded in data. And so I want to start our conversation actually asking the economist on the stage to share a little bit about what you are seeing in labor market data and economic trends around the current and future demand for workers with training beyond a high school diploma. What data points are top of mind for you? What data are you seeing that we should in this room be aware of, Nicole?
So good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. I think the last time I was in Tennessee, we were speaking about another goal, a drive to 55. So it's really, really great to talk about these goals. But so if you have to think about where jobs and opportunities stands for the future, or what sort of numbers we should take away, one number that we've been playing around with for a while is that 72% of all jobs of the economy of the United States of America by 2031 would require post-secondary education and training beyond high school. So every single job, 72% of them will require something beyond high school. And when we talk about beyond high school, we actually mean post-secondary vocational certificates, associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and the like. So we're not necessarily only speaking towards degrees or bachelor's degrees. We're talking about apprenticeship programs as well, test-based licenses, and any type of credential that you get beyond high school. I think it's important for us to note that we are now in an era of lifelong learning. So no longer can we sit by and think, okay, once we go to school, we get a degree, we're done with it, we can then go to school. We know that AI and our technology has changed the way we think about jobs, we think about skills, we think about your competence in your job. And most of us have to train our students to understand that the next time you come back, there's a revolving door of going in and out of college, maybe some sort of workforce development program. But at the end of the day, it's important for us to remember that we need to get there, get our credential, and perhaps come back to re-up that credential to make sure that we're relevant for the future.
So, President Boyd, I want to turn to you next. My guess is you were probably in that room talking with Nicole about the goal a number of years ago. And Nicole shared this data point of 70+% of jobs requiring some kind of post-secondary education. And I'm curious, at the University of Tennessee, how are you thinking about making sure that those credentials or degrees are aligned with what the workforce will need?
Yeah, thank you. So at the University of Tennessee, we're working across all of our campuses to make sure that we're aligned with the workforce needs. Last year we produced 13,274 graduates, and those are across the state. We work with all kinds of industry to make sure that we're aligned. Probably one that people sometimes overlook is the UT Health Science Center in our medical professions. I would suggest to you that there is no academic unit anywhere in the country that's more aligned with their industry than our academic unit or our professional schools in medicine. So the University of, or the College of Medicine, they send their students to hospitals that are the entire faculty, or all the doctors are faculty of our university, and our students then go and spend 1 to 2 years of residency. So that's the most integrated and aligned part of our system. But all across the system, all of our departments have advisory boards that are working really closely with industry. A couple of recent example again on the medical side at the UT Health, or the UT Medical Center in Knoxville, which is no longer part of UT. They have, like every medical hospital across the country, a dire shortage of nurses. To try to solve that, we partnered with them. They actually built a facility on their campus, which our junior and senior students studying nursing go. They pay for their last 2 years of school on the condition that they'll come work for them for another 3 years. So it's just an example of ways in which we have to work closer with our industry partners to make sure that we're meeting their needs.
Right. All right, and then let's pull back to K-12, and Commissioner, I want to turn to you. I think we all probably in this room would say, yeah, things need to change in the high school space specifically to be prepared for this world where 70+% of jobs require some kind of post-secondary credential degree. What's it going to take to transform the student experience in K-12 education to be ready for that? What are the systems that need changing, and how are you thinking about that in K-12?
So yes, absolutely. We want to be able to be at the forefront of really thinking about what the high school experience is and how that can lead to kids that want to be engaged in post-secondary, whether it is an apprenticeship or community college, the TCAT, or four-year university, whatever it is they choose. But what I always want to get back to, particularly at the department, representing the Department of Education, is that our first job, first and foremost, is to develop and build the academic skills and knowledge that every student needs to have in order to make those choices. We shouldn't have certain kids that are being primed to go into certain pathways after high school, whether it's career, college, or apprenticeship, or any other kind of work focused, pathway. I like to also remind people too, we are not a workforce agency. We are an education agency. And so it behooves us to remember that foundationally, we have to develop skills and knowledge in all of our content areas, including the sciences, including civic knowledge, all the things that employers say they want, so that we can build and develop a pipeline of an educated society. It is just critical. Workforce cannot happen in an educated society. Our economy is dependent upon students being educated so that they don't stop at one sector in their pathway just because they can't go anywhere else. And so we need to change things. And not only do we need to keep the rigor, but we also need to rethink what our CTE pathways are and what we're offering our students. Because yes, it's fun to take some certain classes, particularly after your, sophomore, junior year, when you're pretty much almost done with testing and all the things. But now's the time to give these kids the ability to be able to decide what it is they want to do. And in high school, can we help them make those decisions, at least about the direction they want to go in, before they actually go into the post-secondary and then have to start thinking about it all over again?
And that's a great point, Commissioner. And I think we'll hear throughout the day today, I know there are going to be a number of sessions and conversations about what are the skills that we need to make sure students are building in the K-12 space. What does that mean needs to happen in the courses that they're taking? And so, moving away from students getting sort of a smattering of different skills, some which might be STEM focused and some which, might be yodeling or something like that, right? To skills and pathways that really are leading to a high wage, high demand job. Kelly, I want to turn to you next. One of the things that I think is unique about Tennessee is the role that philanthropy has played and is playing to catalyze change and to show what's possible and to build new models. And I think we have lots of examples of folks, both on this stage and in this room, who have invested in new models and new efforts that are now being scaled across the state. And so I'd be curious to ask you how you're thinking about philanthropy's role in this conversation, and And as one of the national leaders in the room, how are you thinking, and how's Arnold Ventures thinking about the way philanthropy can catalyze new solutions in the education to employment space across the country?
Right. Well, our goals in our higher education philanthropic work, I think, are similar to what others have stated and we share in the room. We want to ensure that when students enter higher education systems, they come out better off, because I agree with you, education is economic development, but it's actually not for a lot of students, right? Many students don't complete their post-secondary education and they end up with debt but no degree. And some end up with the degree that doesn't have value. And so our focus is really ensuring that the programs that are offered have value to provide value to students, number one. Number two, we think there need to be a variety of pathways. So not a single answer for all students, but lots of options to go from education to career. And then finally, as a policy-oriented organization, we think about the return on public dollars that are invested in the space, and are we investing those dollars in a way that has the highest return? And for us as a philanthropy, we think a lot of our role is evaluating programs and policies to help determine what works, to then elevating and promoting and shining a light on those policies, and then helping to fund them as well.
Okay, so you mentioned policies. I want to turn to the two folks who are thinking probably every day about state policy, and Commissioner Reynolds and President Boyd. How could state level policy in Tennessee foster this alignment or better alignment across K-12 higher education and workforce systems? Are there things that you think we're doing right now that are particularly helpful or beneficial? I don't know, maybe there are things you'd want to see in the future. And I don't know, President Boyd, maybe if you want to start.
Let me make two comments.
Yeah.
First, I worry, and you, David, you and I have had this conversation, I worry about the focus on the return on investment on a college degree. So I think it's important. And from a policy point of view, I know there's been some conversation about maybe creating incentives or penalties for universities for producing degrees that don't have the highest economic return. I think it's important that we are transparent and that make sure that students can see what that return would be. However, there are really important skills that we need, like social work. And in some cases, some of our educators and some of our rural areas don't really make that much, but it's so critical to our society. Right. So I want to make sure that we don't disincentivize people that want to, don't disincentivize institutions to provide education in those critical fields. But there are things that are working now. I think it was the Chancellor Tidings here, that she's a leader in providing dual enrollment classes at our high schools. I don't know the stat. I see Stephen Gentile in the room. I know he probably knows the new stat, but 10 years ago when we were talking about the drive to 55, one of the things we talked about was the fact that if you took 2 dual enrollment classes, you had a 95% chance of going to school, or going to post-secondary. So I saw your goal of, what was it for post-secondary? Tricia, what was your goal?
It was 57% currently pursue post-secondary, goal 77% pursue.
So the answer would be more dual enrollment, and the more the better. So I think it's a great, as a policy, and we're doing that now, but the more we can emphasize dual enrollment, the more likely we'll get to that goal.
That's great. I would say another example, when you mentioned social work, teaching, I think is another one that comes up in this conversation too. Commissioner, what's on your mind on the policy?
So on the policy front, yes, there are some opportunities to change, particularly the idea around, I think I've said this last year and I say it all the time, so some of y'all are probably sick of hearing me about it, but it is college and career and military. One of the things that we are refocusing on is the opportunities that are provided by our military service and the pathways that can come out of that, and the education and the non-debt pathways there that the military can provide. So I think we have somewhat lost our focus on the value and importance of military service, and I think that's important to emphasize. That said, we also need to maintain many of the policies we have right now, and that includes our graduation requirements. That includes continuing to ensure that our students all have access to the higher level maths, the higher level sciences, social studies, and English language arts, so that they can continue in being lifelong learners, whatever pathway it is they choose. And I worry about that. I worry about that a lot. particularly every time the General Assembly comes to town, because I know that everybody has these isolated stories of some kid, there is some disconnect, but sometimes that disconnect is because kids were not given the benefit of of having expectations that are high, or whatever I was trying to say. Because I don't think that came out right. So we've got kids, right? We need to maintain that all kids can achieve. All kids should have access to Algebra 2 coursework. All kids should have access to chemistry coursework, because when we talk about elevating our CTE work, including the fact that the CTE framework has changed, we're talking about really adding issues like business management, digital technology, finance, entrepreneurship, so that kids can take whatever it is their passions are and take it to that next level. We do not need to be offering courses anymore in high school or in higher education that are going to lead to jobs where you can max out at $38,000 a year before you have to go somewhere else or find another pathway. So I know I'm kind of an old broken record on this, if all of y'all know what records are anymore. But this is really important to me. And that is why we have the systems and the policies in place right now. As David demonstrated through the PowerPoint, we are sustaining our academics, and that matters, and it matters all day long.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I think that was probably somebody just in the AV section who was agreeing with you so much that they just wanted to jump on the mic and say that. So Paul, all right, I want to turn to you. Haven't forgotten about you. So you, Paul, are looking, I think, across the country at exemplars, models that are solving some of the challenges that we've talked about so far today. And one of the things that I think Tennessee is very fortunate to have is organizations and efforts that are providing just outstanding advising and support to students along this trajectory. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on things that you're seeing or best practices that are emerging for you across the country around supports and guidance for students along this education to career pathway. And Kelly, I'll probably ask you the same question just from your perspective as well. But Paul, love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a broad consensus that we don't do a good job in this country of exposing young people to the possibilities of careers, what even exists. And also that we need to start earlier than people think. Really, middle school, I think folks think is the right time to start showing people what's possible. And I'm really, the experiments that excite me the most, that seem to have the most potential to move the needle, blur the lines between K-12, college, and careers. And that's very hard to do. It takes resources and a lot of work, but a couple of the examples that I'm most excited about. In Indiana, they've really changed graduation requirements for K-12. They've started to work in skills training and even career exploration, and they have some very ambitious goals. Definitely, I think one of the experiments that's going to sink or swim apprenticeship in this country is Indiana. They're modeling after the Switzerland approach to apprenticeship and doing it with youth apprenticeship. Their goal is to have 50,000 Indianans participate in a youth apprenticeship in the next decade. So, and just very briefly, I'm really excited about a recent announcement from Arnold Ventures about helping folks with the kind of advising and life skills, but I won't step on that.
Okay.
But I think, the Bloomberg funded healthcare high schools, if you all haven't seen this, fascinating, $250 million from Bloomberg Philanthropies to create 10 high schools around the country that expose kids to careers in healthcare.
Yeah.
And to do it in a way that they can apply that learning as transferable skills.
Paul, and I would just say 2 of those in Tennessee, just to note. Okay, Paul teed you up, Kelly. What are you seeing in this space?
Well, fabulous. So we fund research into all kinds of programs, and very happily and on an exciting front, there has been a lot of progress shown in the last few years that student success programs, support programs, can really increase graduation rates. And so a couple of programs that I would highlight in particular is the City University of New York's ASAP program. This program has shown to double graduation rates for those pursuing two-year associate's degrees. There's also Project Quest, which is shown to be an impactful workforce development program. And in Tennessee, you are experimenting and you are trying to move programs like this forward at, I believe it's Nashville State. There is the Nashville Grad Program, which is a replication of the City University of New York's program. So we are seeing specific universities with specific programs that are making progress, and we're learning in general what about these programs makes them effective. And it's four factors have been identified most pronounced. One is structured advising. So there is very specific, regimented, and prescribed advising provided to students in these support programs. Two, they're given dedicated financial support. And that support goes toward their academic needs, but it also goes beyond that, recognizing that many students in these programs have, they need the support to complete those degrees that actually has nothing really to do with the classroom itself. Three, incentives to enroll full-time or close to it, because students are far less successful and these programs are less successful when students aren't in them full-time. And then fourth, it could feel squishy, but it's important is a sense of community.
Right. President Boyd, I want to turn to you next. So I asked you earlier about how you're thinking at the post-secondary level around the connection between post-secondary and work. And now I want to get your thoughts about what you think can and should be happening when you sort of think about post-secondary to K-12. Are there things that that you are seeing or that you'd like to see to better strengthen partnerships between K-12 and post-secondary education around these pathways? Just to be curious about your thoughts on that too.
Well, I think we're doing a lot now across the state, partnering with the K through 12. I think with some of the programs we've talked about, like with the the Tennessee Promise program that we created, I guess now you put on the chart about 10 years ago. Yeah. A lot of those students give opportunities to come and visit our campuses, our community colleges across the state, and we also have something called the UT Promise, in which students are getting exposed to the universities at a fairly early age. One of the things I wanted to mention with regards to the Tennessee Promise is that one of the things that was we think about getting students more aligned with the workforce. A couple of little brag points, but since the program started, we've now sent 133,000 students to community college free of tuition and fees. One of the things that they're required to do is a community service hours, and since it started, they've completed 5 million community service hours. But one of the things they can do for the community service hours is job shadowing. The most popular community service option is job shadowing. So imagine students in high school before they go to college spending a day with somebody in the line of work that they plan on doing. So I think that's an example of connecting high school to college to the workforce. And so one of the things I think we should be proud of.
Great. Okay, I want to turn next to a couple questions about data, what data is telling us, and about research and what we know from research about pathways for students into the workforce. And Nicole, I'll come back to you, and interested in what you're seeing, or new research, or maybe it doesn't have to be new, research that's just top of mind for you about the future economy and workforce. And you gave us, I think, some great stats at the beginning of this conversation that should be top of mind for us throughout the day. And would love for you to go maybe a little bit deeper and share some things you're seeing, or what research is telling us about the future economy, the future workforce, and if there's any advice that you have for us about how we might be expanding opportunity for students towards high wage, high demand careers.
So I just love this question, because we are here talking about better connecting K-12 to workforce and all of the challenges that's so doing. We're also talking about making sure we have better opportunities for all. But in order to do that, we have to pay attention to what I like to call the pink and blue elephant in the room, the fact that all still results in, looking at people who are different. And there's a lot of policy right now at the federal level that's telling you we have to remove many of these programs that provide, opportunity for people who are marginalized communities, traditionally marginalized communities. But the question is, can we do that given the demographic cliff? We do have a demographic cliff that's coming. So my research is showing that in the next 10 years, we are going to be facing significant skill shortages because by definition, we just don't have enough people. If you look at the number of people who are leaving the workforce, the 55 to 64-year-olds, we know that there are about 26 million of them in the next 8 years. We look at the people who are 16 to 24 who are coming into the workforce. There are about 20 million of them. You just do the math. That's a 6 million shortage of just people for those jobs. We haven't even factored in job growth. So we know that you're simply looking at the behavior of the population and how we've been, exiting and entering the workforce. We know we don't have enough people. You take that with the demographic cliff, which leads to an enrollment cliff. So we just don't have enough people. And we have to also recognize that the face of the economy is changing. Right now, we speak about a 2042 as the year in which, the United States is going to be a majority minority country. But we've already become a majority minority country in certain cohorts, especially in K-12 in different parts of the country. And we know by definition, some of these students don't perform at the same level as everyone else. So we have, just top of my head, Black students performing at 1 standard deviation below white students in SAT and standardized tests. So we have to be concerned about making sure that we spend enough time graduating these students because they are the students who are predominantly the incoming cohort of workers. We have to make sure we graduate enough of them. And we want to make sure that we continue to engage the students as fully as possible. I mean, this entire rhetoric on all, yes, we want to make sure we do all, but all has subdivisions and different demographic profiles, and we have to be conscious of that.
I want to ask just a follow-up question and maybe assume that I'm in your 101 class at Georgetown. When you say enrollment or a demographic cliff, can you describe what that actually, what's going to happen? And then also, I think the other question I'd be interested in is you mentioned skill shortages. I'd be curious to know what skills specifically you feel like we're at risk of having a shortage.
Okay, so when we talk about the demographic cliff, we're just talking about the nature of our economy and the fact that we're an aging population, we're an aging society, and that's positive. It means a lot of us in this room are over the age of 55. We've spoken about the silver tsunami for quite some time. So, our baby boomers actually going to retire. I mean, I was saying this to my director who was in his 70s for quite some time. Are you ever going to retire? I don't know. But eventually people are retiring. We saw a lot more of that during COVID. So I want you to think about ARP's statement that in 2025 and 2026, we will have the largest proportion of people who are 65 years and over in this country ever. All right, so it's the largest number of people turning 65 in 2025, 2026. But you couple that with the birth dearth. So we don't have a significant number of people who are, having babies and having children anymore. And that's also a function of a prosperous society. I mean, it's nothing that's unique to the United States. It's something that Europe is experiencing as well. So that's the demographic cliff where we have more and more people who are aging, and not enough people who are, youthful entering the society. If you think of it in terms of a population pyramid, our population pyramid is becoming more and more top heavy. So we have more people at the top of the pyramid than we have people at the bottom. So as an economist, I'm thinking about what does it mean for long-term opportunity? What does it mean? It means that we don't have enough physical people who are going to be there for the jobs of the future. We have to be running faster and faster. We have made statements about immigration and determination about immigration. That's another story. I mean, I have recommendations about changing the face of immigration to mimic what is observed in Canada and Australia in terms of skilled immigration. But that's another story. But if we're not going to do that, then we have to focus on what's going here. You gave a chart before that showed a declining labor force participation rate for Tennessee, much more so than the rest of the country. We have to figure out how we get those discouraged workers back into the workforce. We know that education is highly correlated with labor force participation, so we have to make sure we get them into schools, into post-secondary vocational programs, and motivated enough back into the workforce because it affects the bottom line. You said education is economic development. Education is economic opportunity as well.
It's great. Okay, yes.
Should I add one point? I agree with everything that Dr. Smith said, but I think for all the Tennesseans in the room, we have one bit of data that's actually really positive for the state of Tennessee. So WICHE just published a report, I guess it was in December, showing the changes in high school graduation across the state or across the country. And across the country, 45 states will have declining populations of high school graduates. There's only 5 states in the country that have increasing high school graduates.
Great.
Tennessee is one of them. In fact, Tennessee is number one. Between now and 2035, we'll have 15% more high school graduates than we do today. So for us, that's a big positive.
Yeah.
Now, the downside for us, those in the university world, everybody else that has declining populations know that, and so they're trying to recruit our students. So it's making it even more competitive. Literally, last year, there was at one point in time, there were 47 job openings in Nashville for high school recruiters for universities outside the state of Tennessee. So it's very competitive, but at least we do have a lot of high school graduates, so that works in our favor.
That's great. Okay, let's keep going on data. Kelly, what types of data are most critical for understanding the effectiveness of these pathways? What are you and the team at Arnold Ventures watching? What data are you using? Maybe candidly, what data do you think stakeholders should be using or looking at as we try to solve some of these challenges?
So the data that we're looking for really falls into 3 big buckets. And the first is, does a program, do colleges help and programs help students graduate? So there's a market failure in both 2- and 4-year programs where much of the incentive for those institutions is enrollment and not necessarily outcomes and completion. And Tennessee, by the way, you are leading the way in many ways, both in policy and programs to try to change this. But we need to understand, if universities are incented for enrollment, how do we make sure that students are graduating? And so looking at data around persistence, graduation rates, transfer rates, because we know nationally that 3 in 5 students do not complete their college program over the course of 6 years, right? I mean, the majority is not completing. So we need to really understand what's driving that. And again, y'all are leading the way here in Tennessee with your outcomes-based funding formula. Second piece of data that we're looking at is a financial one. So can students repay the debt that they're taking on to enter and complete these programs? And that's because, we can say a lot about economic mobility and economic opportunity, but is it really bearing out? And so there we're looking to data around employment rates, wages, debt levels, and SCORE is helping with this with your impact credential framework. But there is a lot of progress that needs to be made nationally to really understand this economic data. And then the third bucket of data that we're looking at, and Dr. Smith, you talked about this, is our programs and colleges producing graduates that have the skills that's meeting the changing labor market. And so again, your impact credential here at SCORE and in Tennessee is helping with that, but there is so much more that we need to understand in order for programs to be shaped and developed in a way that meets current and future labor market needs.
Awesome. Okay, and then Paul, again, you're seeing how states, regions, communities are using data in innovative ways, and would love for you to share how you're seeing data being leveraged to build some of these pathways or to build perhaps focus among stakeholders around pathways that are really sort of connecting education and career in meaningful ways.
So it's great to be a journalist talking on stage where I don't have to attribute the smart things that I'm quoting other folks who actually are experts. But looking at the nation's higher ed funding policies, I think the smart money is that the future should look like Texas. Texas has a relatively new funding formula for its community colleges, HB 8, where they're trying a very complex, ambitious measure of credentials of value as part of the funding formula. So I'm not going to try to explain what that means, but it's everything. It's certifications, it's certificates, non-degree credentials, as well as degrees, and trying to align state support for community colleges to that. But what's really, I think, encouraging and interesting is it's a carrot and a stick. they have raised the outlay for those community colleges by 23% while doing that to incentivize that alignment. I mean, Texas has a scale that others don't, and probably some potential for data quality that other smaller states might not. But I think folks should really watch that one. And just very briefly, another, like all the really important experiments, these are enormously complex projects. But, talking about that workforce participation rate, I'm not sure folks really understand the urgency behind that. We are in the bottom half of wealthy countries with employment and labor force participation. More than 1 in 3 American adults is not working or looking for a job. And in Alabama, that is their clarion call. All of their work around this starts with that labor force participation rate. And they have a project called the Alabama Talent Triad, which tries to really break apart the skills that employers are looking for in jobs and match them with a kind of disaggregated competency-based view of credentials to do better skills matching for folks. Two of the most exciting experiments I've seen in my career.
Those are great examples. Thanks, Paul. Okay,
Can I jump in?
of course, Commissioner, absolutely.
Two of my really close friends came up with that outcome space for community colleges. So really proud of them for doing that. And I think we could really do some work in that space. But to what both of y'all said, we also, like we talk about being honest about where we are academically, we also need to be honest about credentials of value. And we're going to be, thinking about the outcomes-based formula, and we are going to tier those outcomes. And so you're going to have a lot of programs that are going to be in this tier 1 space that schools aren't going to get as many dollars for that as they would if they elevate tier 2 and tier 3. And our accountability system also rewards tier 2, tier 3. We need to be honest about what we're giving kids in high school, what they're getting in community colleges, what they're getting at the TCATs, what they're getting in our 4 years. And are they really achieving what's the word? They're getting, I'll just use the easy word there, the credentials that they need to be successful in the future. And, I'm issuing challenges all day long because I know kids love their culinary arts programs. But let me tell you, we don't need a bunch of kids with associates in cooking and baking. We need those culinary programs to really think, what are the food sciences, like chemistry, all the things, nutrition, health, the things that also could be attached to those programs that really advance kids to what we need for our future, for our health. This is the health of our society, for just in general, again, engaging kids in different ways. And I just had to jump in there because I worry a lot about that. And I don't think we're being real honest about that right
Well, and it's a great, Commissioner, it's a good point because we talked a little bit, and President Boyd brought this up too, we talked a little bit about the higher education outcomes-based funding. But to your point, Commissioner, there are now components of the K-12
That's right.
Funding formula that are focused on outcomes. And I really appreciate you bringing up some of those examples because I think in the K-12 space, there are opportunities to be focusing more clearly on higher demand, higher wage pathways in high school that the state can now incentivize and fund. So, and President Boyd.
I just want to say one thing we haven't really talked about, another part of the variable, and that is just the cost of college. And one of the things we can be proud of in the state of Tennessee is we have and correct me, Stephen Gentile, if I've got this wrong, but the last time I saw the chart, we lead the country in financial aid directly to our students. So that's something that's really helping our students be able to afford college. We have the Tennessee Promise, which says you can go to Tennessee or to any of our TCATs or our community colleges free of charge. At the University of Tennessee, we borrowed the idea of the Tennessee Promise. And today, if you have a family income of under $75,000, which is 66.7% of all Tennesseans, if you have a family income of under $75,000, you can go to the University of Tennessee free of tuition and fees. Last year, 47% of all of our students graduated with zero debt. Of those that did graduate with debt, it was $26,000, which is down 5% from what it was just 5 years ago. So we do have to have degrees with impact, but we also had to make the degrees that they do earn more affordable.
So last question, and then I'm going to go to a lightning round to wrap us up. And actually, President Boyd, you teed up the question I wanted to ask you. You have spent, I know, a lot of time and focus and energy over the last year communicating the value of degrees to students and families and employers in the state. And I'm just curious if you have any, we have a lot of post-secondary leaders in the room, and I'm curious if you would have any advice for them around how to communicate that effectively, particularly in a world where, to your point earlier in the conversation, there is, people are asking a question about our ROI. How do you communicate that to folks that you're talking to?
Well, it's an all-out effort. I'll thank my partners in higher education across the state. One of the things that's great about Tennessee is that we all work very closely together. Last year, all the LGIs, our locally governed institutions, and the University of Tennessee joined together to have an advertising campaign, just literally to promote the value of a four-year degree. And then we continue to promote at every chance we get just the value of higher education and busting myths. Like one of the myths is if you go to college, or the cost of tuition is going up faster than inflation. We hear that all the time. Not true. Across UT, for the last 5 years, tuition has gone up 0.8% as opposed to inflation, which was 5.2%. If you go to college, you're going to graduate with all this debt. We already mentioned that. If you go to college, there's not jobs for four-year degrees anymore. A stat that TEC published last year from between 2011 and 2021, there was 90,000 fewer jobs that only required a high school degree. 41,000 more jobs in the state of Tennessee that required a technical certificate or degree from our TCAT. So we always thought we need more of our technical degrees, but in that same 10-year period, there was 361,000 more jobs that required a four-year degree. So just getting that information out, we've got to talk about it constantly. I've been sharing those myths for like 2 years now.
Yeah.
And what's frustrating about it is every time I share it, people come up, wow, I had no idea. We've been talking about this for 2 years, but I think it's just repetition. The facts are on our side. We just got to do a better job of communicating.
Great. Okay. So our final question, we're just going to do kind of a rapid fire round here. And I'm going to start with Commissioner Reynolds, and then we'll just go down this way, and President Boyd will have the last word. If you could highlight one critical step for your sector, K-12, philanthropy, higher education, to take in the next year to advance education to work alignment, to solve some of the challenges that we talked about today, what would that be? And this is just a small question, easy question. Commissioner, give us one big thing that we should do.
Gosh. Again, we have been working together, but we really need to eliminate the silos. I mean, they're there. We still work in these little pockets. We need to, as we think about what the future, what our economy needs, we need to be, again, aligned in what we're actually offering our students all the way from kindergarten all the way until graduate school. That it's meaningful, that it matters, and it's going to contribute to the success of this state first and foremost. And while we're close, we're not there yet. And a lot of that has to do with really having these honest conversations about what we're truly offering to our students across the state in our high schools and in higher education.
Great. All right, Nicole, give us a charge for the work ahead.
So I would elaborate on alignment, and I would say align, because misalignment can be costly. And we sort of spoke about that a little bit. What Commissioner spoke about, people who might be pursuing certain types of degrees. We don't need so many people who are in culinary arts or in baking. So I would start backward looking, and I'm a researcher, so that's what I will do. Look at the jobs, look at the distribution of jobs, where are the opportunities, and make sure that our colleges and the universities are creating those types of credentials that align with the high value, high demand jobs.
Great.
So in this way, if the programs that are available are the ones in high value, high demand, we don't necessarily have to be concerned about bakers. Oh, so maybe somebody over there is beatboxing. I don't know. So we just have to be really concerned about aligning, make sure we properly align workforce going back. I think the one challenge I have is at the K-12 level, where it was mentioned that you have to start even earlier with experiential learning, right? You have to expose these kids, even in middle school, to what these jobs are, what the opportunities are. Make sure that everyone, all students have these types of access, because depending on where you are, there's still a high degree of correlation between where you are and where you end up. You want to break those barriers down so that everyone can have access. And the only way to do that is to take you all the way from early childhood education all the way through K-12, get them exposed to these high value programs, however that is, and get them into the colleges sooner than later.
So for the philanthropists in the room, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I didn't hear the hissing or the heavy breathing, so I was unsure. So for the philanthropists in the room, our work can be viewed as soft at times, right? And that we can move toward movements that feel right in the moment. And so my encouragement in this space is let's look to data and evidence. And so when we think about programs that work, does real causal data show that students are better off because they were a part of that program? And then from a policy perspective, thinking about how can we look to data and evidence to think about incentives, and how can we create and then implement and support incentives that move the sector in the right direction toward ensuring that students have degrees of value, that they complete them, that they are economically mobile because they're not saddled with debt that burdens them for their lifetime, and that they have skills that meet the current and evolving labor market needs.
Right. I'll speak for employers. I think the single most transformative change that would help attack these really huge problems we're facing is for employers to view themselves as co-producers of talent, to view that they have a responsibility to not just contribute to making sure that these programs are preparing people for good careers, but that they're paying for them, that they're contributing resources, instruction. That's happening. It's, shoots of green. It's not everywhere. In Maine, the community colleges have employers that employ half the state's citizens contributing to short-term credential programs in any way that they can. And it's a revolutionary shift. I mean, the system chancellor told me, if you look to hire a welder in the past, you would just hire a welder, assume that welder had been trained. Now you have to contribute to the education and training if you want to find the talent.
Say that one more time. Co-producers and
Co-producers of talent.
Okay, yeah, that's good. All right.
Well, I'll build on what Paul said. I agree 100%. At the university level, we need to be more nimble and more innovative and more connected to employers. And here's an example of something we've done in the last couple of years. At the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, we created something called the College of Emerging and Collaborative Studies, KEX for short. But we don't really love the name, but it's very descriptive. And what it means is we meet with employers monthly. They come to us and describe the type of talent they specifically need. And sometimes they don't need a student that has just gone to the College of Business or the College of Engineering. They want somebody that has 12 hours of artificial intelligence and 12 hours of marketing and maybe 12 hours of ethics. They tell us the skill sets that they need, and then we create a program around that, and then students apply for that to meet the job skills that the students or that the employers have asked for. So we have to be more adaptive, more nimble, and closer connected.
Great. This has been a fantastic conversation, and would just ask you all, please join me in thanking this panel for their. So we have about 16 minutes before our breakout sessions begin. You'll see in your packets what those sessions are. Would encourage you to attend them, and then we will be back here for our next plenary session and testing of mic sounds at 10 after 11. Thank you so much.